Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. A campaign called Rewind and Reframe has been launched this week involving young women denouncing sexism and racism in music videos. They've called on the music industry and the government to address it. MPs will launch a website where women and girls will be able to blog and provide their views on sexualised videos. Measures also include the introduction of a rating system. These were among recommendations by the Bailey Review into the sexualisation and commercialisation of childhood, which was carried out earlier this year. It comes amid growing criticism that women are being portrayed as sex objects in many music videos. Springing to mind are videos by singers such as Rihanna and the pop star Miley Cyrus, who has unleashed an extraordinarily sexualised new image on her young fan base. Indeed, last week the website NetMums surveyed parents, showing there was strong parental disapproval for sexualised content in many videos. Do they have a point? Well, to discuss this, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Alex Taylor. He's a freelance journalist and ambassador for disability at NSPCC. Also here in the studio is Alex Fancanel, who is a researcher at the University of Bedfordshire, specialising in sexuality and gender issues. Neil Sinclair, who's a parenting expert and author of Commando Dad. And on the line from New York, we have Emma Keller, who is a Guardian US columnist. Thank you very much for joining me on The Voice of Russia. NetMums think that there's too much sexualised content in many videos. Neil Sinclair, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, very much so. I think it's, for me, I've got a 7-year-old daughter, Liberty, and, and it really concerns me that, she's very, very interested in these, these videos and the music. I mean, the music's, it's very, it's very catchy, it's very engaging, and it really concerns me that she sees these images, and I think one of the things that really concerns me is the accessibility of this stuff now. I mean, they're not doing anything that Madonna didn't do 20 years ago, but that was put on at such a time when it was on a particular channel at a particular time. But now with devices like Kindles and iPhones and all of the other things that you can get, a couple of clicks, and my daughter could be watching some of the material that I just don't think is appropriate for her.
Alex Taylor, this debate rears its head every few years. Are we seeing anything different? Is there more sexualised content in terms of these music videos than there was, say, 10 years ago?
What I actually think is that with Miley, it has highlighted the issue a lot more. But what you really have to look at is, as you mentioned, Neil, it's about the higher levels of access which young people have now with services such as YouTube and things like that, where the access is universal, it's not age restricted. And what that means is that with the access and the popularity which these websites have, they are all about achieving hits. And so for them, a good way to do that is by using music videos as an avenue. But what I think we have to do with this is they have a responsibility to not only pander to the record labels, but also look at it objectively and offer kids an alternative with a few other things. Because I think what's happened now is that they only have this one world of the music of all of the videos.
So it's an issue of what's accessible nowadays. But I'm just wondering, I mean, Alex Fancanel, you specialise in sexuality and gender issues. What kind of attitudes do these music videos actually promote? Is it really just an issue of accessibility, or is there something kind of slightly more sexualised and sinister, perhaps, about what we're seeing now?
I'm not sure that it's something which is demonstrating an increase in the sexual explicitness of the representation of sexuality within these music videos, which is as much the problem, as Neil and Alex have already said, as the way in which they're consumed or able to be consumed in a much more informal and casual way. As Neil has said, his children can access it on their on tablets. It's all over the internet, and so it's something which is easy to get hold of without perhaps explaining the context within which those images should be consumed, and also the way in which they're problematic. What I would like to say, though, is that I think that one of the problems with the sexualised images is not simply that they present femininity in this very disposable, very consumable fashion. So the feminine body is something which can be used sexually, or the images of which can be used sexually, without any sort of understanding of this misogyny within the society which allows those images to be produced. One of the dangers with saying that that's new and that's to do with Miley Cyrus or Rihanna is that actually the very presentation that they perform in their videos and in their music are reflections of what the society itself wants to see. And so what they're doing is merely functioning within wider discourses of the already sexualised society in which we live, which assumes that women's bodies can be consumed, which perpetuates rape myths. And so the harmfulness of these videos is not what these artists do themselves or the decisions that they've made, but the system in which those decisions have been made.
So effectively you're saying that, I mean, they would insist, certainly Miley Cyrus would insist that she is empowering herself and that she is calling the shots, but you're saying that actually the wider industry within which she functions in society as a whole is controlling her, and maybe she's not aware of that exploitation.
It's the ultimate con. It's the same reason why you have women who take their clothes off and pose for Page 3 and are very proud of that, and you have women who will pose for Nuts magazine and Zoo magazine and say we're really empowered, what we're doing is we're taking off our clothes, we're saying we're sexy, we've got autonomy and all that stuff. There are elements of that which I really applaud, because I do think that there is an important discussion to be had in a different context about women and their access to their own sexuality and their own expression of sexual desire. And part of the reasons why I'm quite sympathetic to the claims for autonomy that people like, for instance, Rihanna makes, are that it's too easy to ignore the fact that women are sexual agents who have their own sexual desire, who may be interested who may want to create that win song or whatever it is, but who want to really claim a position of sexual power. And I think that's fantastic. What I'm saying is that actually what's going on is that it's a console back to women in general, not just these celebrities, not just children who consume these images, to say, yes, women are really empowered, they're taking off their clothes, they think that's fantastic, therefore there's no problem. In fact, it's completely part of the same machine that perpetuates rape myths, as I've already said, but which also creates a culture of rape and the consumption, as I'm saying, of women's bodies as objects to be used, as objects to be consumed.
I'll bring in Emma Keller, who's a Guardian US columnist based in New York City. I'm just wondering what your view is on how much of a role model Miley Cyrus, people like Miley Cyrus and Rihanna actually are for girls, and are children completely uncritical in terms of how they consume these images?
Well, they're not. I mean, I wrote a column about this subject based on my two daughters and their friends and their reaction to Miley Cyrus, who they'd followed for years as she was Hannah Montana. And they've completely lost interest in her as she's taken on this new personality. Girls who watch this kind of content are actually made very uncomfortable by it, and they don't like it. I'm making a different point to the sort of, oh, well, they're influenced by it, and therefore they're going to take all their clothes off too and become sort of mini Mileys. I think girls see this, and, you know, at a time when they're very kind of self-conscious about themselves and going through puberty, they don't like this. It's too much. And so they self-selectively tune out. And I was asking my children yesterday, I've got a 16 and an 11-year-old, you know, how many music videos do you watch? And it's just, music video is not part of their content. And believe me, they devour a lot of content online and on TV. It's not a place they go for entertainment anymore. And I think this kind of sexuality is a part of that.
But from what you're saying, if they're critical of these music videos, and obviously they probably have a good finger on the pulse of what's cool and what's not cool, I suppose, then it won't have any kind of negative impact on them, presumably, because they've got those critical faculties.
We're not all the same. Some people do have those critical faculties and tune out. Other girls might, you know, tune in and be very influenced by it. I don't see the girls who are tuning in and being very influenced by it. I see the girls who are tuning out and who are watching other things. I mean, certainly there's other stuff on TV. Here in America, we've got the show Glee, I think, which is wildly more kind of out there than a Miley Cyrus video that one of my daughters watches and the other one is not allowed to. And I'm sort of amazed by the content of, even though it's a sort of empowering show, of what girls do on that show. So, you know, it's all around us. I'm just saying that it's not there on music videos as something that impresses the girls that I see as being sort of, okay, let's become this.
The one thing I was just going to say about what Emma said, I think that might be quite age-related. the comment she's making about children tuning out, because my daughter's 7, and she just turned 7, and she does find Miley Cyrus, because she hasn't been following Miley Cyrus before. So her first contact with Miley Cyrus is what she's seeing now. And she does find it very, very interesting. So she's not got to the position of tuning out, because she says she hasn't seen the development of Miley Cyrus from what she was to what she now is. I think that's something that you need to think about, because my daughter's not got no frame of reference to think she was that and now she's this. I'm not too keen on that.
It doesn't necessarily follow that children would see the sexy dancing and provocative dressing and want to follow it. How corrosive is it?
I think that's quite a difficult question, because I don't think my daughter finds it as corrosive. I took to, I was invited to go to the school disco, and you see the children on the dance floor doing the moves that they see from these videos. And they don't, in my mind, it's like, oh my God, I can't believe they're doing this. For them, they're just dancing the way that they have seen the people that they like dancing in these videos. So I think corrosive is quite, in my mind, it is. It worries me when I see them, when I see my, children dancing like that. But to them, they're just doing, it's like my boys liked a video which is LMFAO, which is I'm sexy and I know it. That's sexy dancing. That's done by men. But it's the same thing. My boys love doing that when they get onto the dance floor. It's a difficult one.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. We're discussing whether music videos are too sexualised. With me in the studio is Neil Sinclair, a parenting expert and author of the book Commando Dad, Dr. Alex Fang-Hannell, an expert in sexuality and gender issues, Alex Taylor, a journalist and young ambassador for disability at NSPCC, and Emma Gilby-Keller, Guardian US columnist. Alex Taylor, artists, musicians, they've always tried to shock. Parents just simply need to restrict, keep an eye on the devices, and it's not really up to the music industry to censor these things.
No, it's not. But what I would argue is that you're never going to be able to ban any of these things from young kids. They will always find a way to access it. But what you can do is offer them an alternative opinion and a viewpoint to counteract what they are watching, and then make a informed opinion of what they're watching. That's what I think is missing right now.
Do you think that's missing?
I would say that one of the things which is missing is a discussion of the fact of drawing on what Neil's been saying. Your son likes LMFAO, and the men who are doing sexy dancing, we're not up in arms about that. Part of this discussion, this broader social discussion, is an indicator of the backlash against the expression in this context of a raunchy feminine sexuality. And if we're trying to think about offering children an alternative perspective on this, what an alternative perspective might be, that actually if this performance was occurring in a context outside of one which is as ingrainedly sexist as our society is, then it would just be absolutely wonderful to see someone enjoying themselves and having a great time and expressing their sexuality in an autonomous and confident way. But in fact, because it's rooted within this deeply misogynistic society in which we live, it's actually much more problematic than merely just consuming and enjoying these songs and these videos. So offering alternative ways of thinking critically about these things is something which I would adore seeing happening amongst our children. I think it would be fantastic. But it won't be by, as Alex is saying, banning these images, or even by putting little, as the Rewind Reframe campaign is suggesting, rating systems that on videos to say how raunchy they are. Those sorts of things really tend to only be badges of honour.
Emma, can I get your view on that? The idea of a rating system, what do you think of that?
I think a rating system is a complete waste of time. We have ratings on movies here, that are shown in the cinema, but when they go to TV, which is where most people watch them now on demand, iTunes or Netflix or something, there's no ratings at all. So it's only when you have a rating, it's only for a finite period of time anyway, and then it's completely done away with. And I think that you have so much content, with music videos and television programs that never gets rated, but it's completely worthless. I think to pick up on something that was said earlier about Miley Cyrus sort of saying that she was expressing her empowerment in creating this kind of video and enacting this kind of way at award shows, it would be really interesting if she were to explain the process that went behind creating the content. Because when Sinead O'Connor wrote to her and said, you are completely being exploited, I sort of agreed with that. I think there's a balance where Miley Cyrus thinks that she's actually acting in an empowered way, but she is being exploited at the same time. So if she really wants us to believe that she's taking business decisions to act this way as an empowered woman, she should say, okay, we had this creative meeting and I said I'm determined to do this and, got the choreographers and stuff like that, rather than just acting like that and saying, I just do the hell that I want. That might be a way forward.
Indeed, actually, Charlotte Church made a point in an interview a couple of weeks ago that she referred to the culture of demeaning women in pop music as so ingrained as to become routine. It sounds from what Emma is saying there is that she believes that actually the pop music industry, there's this kind of imminence grise of probably males telling her what to do, and she has to convince herself that this is a way to sell music. But at the end of the day, it's still number one on the Billboard chart, so it is working, and she'll probably see that as vindication.
Like as I'm saying, it's basically working because it's a reflection of the values of our society. That using the female body in this way is something which it is largely unproblematic to within a context where women's bodies are generally consumed in advertising, in the press, in all sorts of different contexts, celebrities, all different contexts to do with achieving sort of material gain in this sense really do circulate around the idea that women's bodies are just there for consumption.
Neil, clearly we're talking about the Miley Cyrus video in particular, and there was a massive outrage in the United States, and I'm just wondering how much of the British outrage has been in reaction to the US outrage. I mean, there was an incident a few years ago with Janet Jackson at a music ceremony, and she had to basically apologise to the nations.
I mean, for me, it's like you were saying about the Miley Cyrus on the that twerking incident. I mean, I don't think we were reacting to the way the Americans reacted. I mean, one of the images that really made me look up was Will Smith and his family, and you just saw the horror on their faces. But I was thinking the same. If that had happened in the UK, we would have been as horrified to see what she was doing. As it's very difficult. I don't think you're ever going to get Miley Cyrus to apologise, because I think it's like you say. It's working.
But it is part of a kind of wider culture of, X Factor and all that kind of stuff, where people, probably young people, have worse role models, and that they believe that the path to success is instant and is instant gratification. This fits into that wider picture, doesn't it?
I'm a teacher as well, so I deal with a lot of teenagers. We do tend to forget that to get to be a success, it takes a lot of hard work. I try and instill that in my children. So that's the.
But young people aren't being told that.
I do agree with you, and I do come up against that when I'm teaching, when I'm in the classroom, because I'm a PE teacher. They have this, you get someone who plays football, and they literally think they're God's gift of football, and they're clearly they have a lot of work to do. I mean, for me as a teacher, I really try and make the point that hard work is the way forward.
I mean, on the subject of role models, Alex Taylor, I'm just wondering, I mean, certainly, say, after the London Olympics, there was quite a bunch of very prominent female role models, gold medalists, Victoria Pendleton, Jessica Ennis, people who young people could look up to. I'm wondering whether people like Miley Cyrus undermine that idea of a role model.
I think that with Miley, what the issue is that unlike a gold medalist or anything like that, they can look at her and think, I could be like her. Whereas if you're a Olympic athlete who's won a gold medal in a world record time, it's obvious that not everyone can achieve that. And so I think that obviously it varies on the person, on the girl or the boy. But I think that again, this is where parents and other influencers have a big role to say, look, this is a person who is an artist who has their own agenda and is good fun, but what will get you there is if you work hard. It isn't about partying all night long, it's about working hard. But I think that also we have to remember that Miley moved her records label last year, and the whole purpose of that was in order to kill off her old image as a child star with Hannah Montana. But I think that's worked for her, because we're all now talking about Miley and not Hannah Montana. And so I think what Alex mentioned about kids having a look at these things and then understanding them in another context about what impact it has on them. I think that if your main role model is a pop star, then it's a big issue, which others have to help change.
So she shakes off the Hannah Montana image, and I suppose you could say Britney Spears tried to do it as well. These are kind of confections, aren't they, of the industry, of the entertainment industry. Children, maybe perhaps the best advice they could get from parents is that this isn't the real world. Perhaps that should be the focus.
I would be hesitant to throw the baby out of the bathwater on this one, because actually I think that one thing which I really like about the presentation of sexuality in these women, not just Miley and Rihanna, but Britney you've mentioned, Christina Aguilera, women who've really harnessed their sexuality and their sexual desire. There's a desirability in order to produce music. What I really like is that it sends a message about femininity, that it can be courageous and it can be desiring and it can be strong and it can be autonomous. And I think that those messages are really to be applauded. And one of the problems I think that we have, what we're seeing with this backlash against Miley Cyrus's actions, is that they don't fold into a nice and proper way of being feminine. So on the one hand, you've got Taylor Swift, meekly, nicely spoken, absolutely avowedly not a feminist. There isn't the same sort of hostility to the idea that she's doing the wrong thing with her femininity, whereas the artists that we're speaking about today are in some ways transgressing the traditional idea of and stereotypes of what we want our women, our girls, to look like and behave like. And I think that transgressiveness, when you are critical about the context in which it occurs, that transgressiveness has elements of things which should be applauded. And so that's why I'm not going to wholeheartedly condemn these sorts of activities, but more the context, in the situation in which they occur and what they socially mean.
And that they're being manipulated by a sexist industry.
Not just the industry that's sexist, but actually with a sexist industry that wants to present us with sexist images that they think that we as a society want to consume. So it's much broader than just the industry. It's also the people, like even us who are sitting around this table talking about it, are asked to join in with an opinion about this against the background of the sexism of society in general.
Emma, so there's some aspects of Miley Cyrus that can be applauded.
What we have to remember is that it's all very short term, and her Hannah Montana period was a short term thing which suited an industry exploiting a child or a family who wanted a child to work. And now she's transitioning out of that. And if you look at other people who've sort of gone through this and tried to make the break from being a popular television singing and dancing star into adulthood, you know that regardless of gender, it's a really difficult thing to do. And she's changing her fan base as she does it. I mean, she's losing the people who were younger fans of hers and probably getting an older group. I think the interesting thing to watch is what happens to her in the next 5 years, whether she manages to sustain and, remain a popular entertainment figure as she gets older than being in her young 20s, and where she'll be, let's say, when she's 30 years old, because the industry has a very short-term attention span for sexy women, and, the younger the sexy woman is, the better. So what she's doing now is one thing, but I don't think that it's a long-term solution for her career.
Listening to The Voice of Russia in London, my name is Brendan Cole. We're discussing sexualised images in music videos with Neil Sinclair, Alex Fang-Hannell, Alex Taylor and Emma Keller. Clearly, the genie is out of the bottle. These videos, these outrageous videos will continue. Miley Cyrus will continue doing her thing, and there'll be a range of pop stars in the next few years that will carry on doing that. I mean, what would your advice be? The onus really lays on the parents, doesn't it?
That's it. Absolutely, yeah. I think you've got to try and stay one step ahead of the game when it comes to parental controls, making sure that your children don't. My children use they've got devices, and we use them in the living room, so that we're all together. So they've got parental controls on them as well. I've taught my boys especially to it's very, very easy to accidentally come across something, and I've tried to instill in them, if you find yourself on something, you can come and tell me, and we try and work that out. So I think it really, really is vitally important that parents take the initiative.
Alex Taylor.
What Alex was mentioning about how we look at women, I think that what's happening here is I don't have an issue with Miley partying and acting however she would like, as long as it's her saying, look, girls, I'm a girl, I have a choice here and I'm expressing who I am. However, I think that what one of the main issues is that it's obviously for men, not about women saying, look, this is who I am. This is who I am for men, not for me as a woman. Whereas if you look at when Madonna had the whole Like a Virgin performance, it was all about being a girl and understanding who you are and all of that. But here it's always about, oh, look, here I am, I'm an object, and it's for men. Which I do think we have to realise that there's a distinction there.
The other thing is that Madonna was a bit older. I mean, she was, I think, in her late 20s when she did the Like a Virgin video. She put out the Sex book when she was 33. And there was actually something that she held back a bit. I'm just wondering, given that it's unlikely that the industry will change, do you anticipate this continuing to happen, that we're going to continue to get parental outrage over these kinds of videos, these kinds of performances, and there's nothing we can do about it all?
I think that we will continue to see people being continually outraged, and I think we will see a sort of almost split personality representation of women in the media, particularly, especially young women, as you see now, women who are famous and who've had children and whose children are now entering the peripheries of the public domain, who the Daily Mail in the UK is amongst the most one of the worst culprits of it. Look, sort of sexualizing the adolescent or preteen teenage children of celebrities in order just to run a news story about them, whilst simultaneously being completely outraged about the younger and younger age at which children are entering, are starting to have sex, or the young fan base of people like the celebrities that we're talking about. So I think there will always be this kind of race to the bottom of being outraged, because a different discussion would be about how we choose what things to be upset about and what things to find titillating and exciting, and what things to think are completely, absolutely necessary part of our culture, whereas whilst also anguishing over how much it pollutes our children. So there will always be these sorts of fragmentations.
Do you think that there's a watershed moment where, for instance, this campaign Rewind and Reframe, do you think that can actually do something about it, that can actually stand up for parents and concerned parents and parents of children? I mean, or is it really we're focusing on the wrong things? Parents need to look at what their children are accessing, and that needs to be the focus of any kind.
Well, I would really encourage parents to look at what their children are accessing, to be interested in what their children are accessing, and I think that's not a particularly controversial point to make. I think everybody would agree with that. However, I think that the focus on parents and their children is misplaced. Actually, it would be much more useful to transform the way in which we think about sexism in general, and the readiness with which sexist ideas are created and reproduced everywhere at all levels of society. So I think that's a much bigger challenge than looking at whether or not we should change the way in which music videos are created. As we've already talked about, music videos are almost, they're a form of art, and art will always be transgressive. Well, rather, it won't always be transgressive, but it's something which a transgressive piece of art is a good piece of art. It's meant to challenge us, and if it challenges us by showing us these sexist images and then asks us to reflect on why we think they're sexist, and perhaps contest the circumstances and the social context in which that occurs, I think I would applaud that, but I don't think that that's what this work is doing.
Sadly, we've run out of time, but that's Alex Van Cannel, who is a researcher at the University of Bedfordshire, specialising in sexuality and gender issues. Also here in the studio, Alex Taylor, a journalist and young ambassador for disability at NSPCC, and here in the studio too is Neil Sinclair, a parenting expert and author of Commando Dad. On the line from New York, we had Emma Keller, who's a Guardian US columnist. Thank you all very much for joining me, Brendan Cole, on The Voice of Russia in London. In many videos. Do they have a point? Well, to discuss this, I'm pleased to be joined in the studio by Alex Taylor. He's a freelance journalist and ambassador for disability at NSPCC. Also here in the studio is Alex Van Cannel, who is a researcher at the University of Bedfordshire, specialising in sexuality and gender issues. Neil Sinclair, who's a parenting expert and author of Commando Dad. And on the line from New York, we have Emma Keller, who is a Guardian US columnist. Thank you very much for joining me on The Voice of Russia. Net mums think that there's too much sexualized content in many videos. Neil Sinclair, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I do, very much so. I think it's, for me, I've got a 7-year-old daughter, Liberty, and and it really concerns me that she's very, very interested in these these videos and the music. I mean, the music's. it's very, it's very catchy, it's very engaging, and it really concerns me that she sees these images, and I think one of the things that really concerns me is the accessibility of this stuff now. I mean, they're not doing anything that Madonna didn't do 20 years ago, but that was put up.
Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. A campaign called Rewind and Reframe has been launched this week involving young women denouncing sexism and racism in music videos. They've called on the music industry and the government to address it. MPs will launch a website where women and girls will be able to blog and provide their views on sexualised videos. Measures also include the introduction of a rating system. These were among recommendations by the Bailey Review into the sexualisation and commercialisation of childhood, which was carried out earlier this year. It comes amid growing criticism that women are being portrayed as sex objects in many music videos. Springing to mind are videos by singers such as Rihanna and the pop star Miley Cyrus, who has unleashed an extraordinarily sexualised new image on her young fan base. Indeed, last week the website NetMums surveyed parents, showing there was strong parental disapproval for sexualised content
as an avenue. But what I think we have to do with this is they have a responsibility to not only pander to the record labels, but also look at it objectively and offer kids an alternative with a few other things. Because I think what's happened now is that they only have this one world of the music of all of the videos.
So it's an issue of what's accessible nowadays. But I'm just wondering, I mean, Alex Van Cannel, you specialise in sexuality and gender issues. What kind of attitudes do these music videos actually promote? Is it really just an issue of accessibility, or is there something kind of slightly more sexualised and sinister, perhaps, about what we're seeing now?
I'm not sure that it's something which is demonstrating an increase in the sexual explicitness of the representation of sexuality within these music videos, which is as much the problem, as Neil and Alex have already said, as the way in which they're consumed or are able to be consumed in a much more informal and casual way. As Neil has said, his children can access it on their on tablets. It's all over the internet.
On at such a time when it was on a particular channel at a particular time, but now with devices like Kindles and iPhones and all of the other things that you can get, a couple of clicks, and my daughter could be watching some of the material that I just don't think is appropriate for her.
Alex Taylor, this debate rears its head every few years. Are we seeing anything different? Is there more sexualised content in terms of these music videos than there was, say, 10 years ago?
What I actually think is that with Miley, it has highlighted the issue a lot more. But what you really have to look at is, as you mentioned, Neil, it's about the higher levels of access which young people have now with services such as YouTube and things like that, where the access is universal, it's not age restricted. And what that means is that with the access and the popularity which these websites have, they are all about achieving hits. And so for them, a good way to do that is by using music videos.
And so it's something which is easy to get hold of without perhaps explaining the context within which those images should be consumed, and also the way in which they're problematic. What I would like to say, though, is that I think that one of the problems with the sexualised images is not simply that they present femininity in this very disposable, very consumable fashion. So the feminine body is something which can be used sexually, or the images of which can be used sexually, without any sort of understanding of this misogyny within the society which allows those images to be produced. One of the dangers with saying that that's new and that's to do with Miley Cyrus or Rihanna is that actually the very presentation that they perform in their videos and in their music are reflections of what the society itself wants to see. And so what they're doing is merely functioning within wider discourses of the already sexualised society in which we live, which assumes that women's bodies can be consumed, which perpetuates rape myths. And so the harmfulness of these videos